I'm Skip Tyler. Michelle Gilio has joined us as well. And just wanted to thank you again for coming out today to join us for our Desmos activities presentation. We have our two amazing high school math coaches who have developed this and are leading the way through this. So I'm going to introduce them and then step back and get out of their way so they can give you the information you're here for. So we have Katie Bookbinder, who is our high school math coach, and Javier Cabezas, who is also our high school math coach. They are, again, Desmos experts. They are your go-to people throughout the course of the year as well. And if you're interested in becoming a Desmos expert, just continue to ask them questions, and they are growing people left and right. So with that, I will gladly introduce the two of them and turn it over. Hey!
Thank you, Skip. Nice. All right, again, my name is Katie Bookbinder, and I'm going to go ahead and get you started on what we're going to do. But before that, I do want to go over just a few norms. So at first, if you all could make sure you're all muted, which you are, that's just to prevent feedback in case there's stuff going on in the background that you don't want us to hear. As we go through this presentation, though, there will be times where it is okay for you to turn off your microphone and ask questions whenever you have them. In addition to that, if your cell phone is near you, if you could please turn it onto silent, so that way if it's like sitting on the table next to your computer and you unmute yourself, we don't have to hear your phone constantly vibrating. So again, if you could just silence your cell phones, just like if you were in a movie theater. And then also we are going to get to doing stuff on a Desmos activity. When it comes to that, please feel free to ask questions whenever you want, unmute yourself, as long as it's something that's math related pertaining to that activity. If it is something where it's like a technical thing, or maybe you're thinking about it in terms of being a teacher, put those questions in the chat and Javier is going to answer those questions as I go through that activity. All right, but first we're going to do something just to make sure you're familiar with how to do a few things on Microsoft Teams. So could you raise your hand if you have used Microsoft Teams before this moment? Awesome. All right, you can lower your hands now. All right, so what we're going to do first is we're going to put you into groups. We're not going to do anything math related right now. We're just going to make sure that you can access a group. So Javier, do you have groups made?
I do. Okay. So in the chat box right now, I've dropped in, I think everybody, a couple people joined and I tried to catch them. But if you just take a look there, you'll see group 1. And if your name is within that group, please use the channel that is in the lobby for this session. For group 1, you should see a video icon I'm going to be creating right now. If I can figure out how to make one. Okay.
All right, so first what we're going to do is you're going to go into your groups just so that you can, again, access your group and also so that you can talk to people that are in your group. Before you do that, though, I want to share my screen so that I can show you. I'm going to back up for a second. No, I'm not. We're going to make sure you can get into your groups and raise your hand if you access the agenda and you have the agenda open. Awesome. Even if you don't, that's okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to drop into the chat some things that you guys are going to talk about. So if you're on the agenda, it's listed there. If you don't have the agenda, I put in some questions. Oh, sorry, that came in really weird. But what you're going to do is you're going to introduce yourself with your name, your school, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low and 5 being high, how comfortable you are with using Desmos activities with your students, and then something interesting about yourself. All right, so without further ado, if you could go to your groups. Let me share my screen and I will show you how to do that. All right, so you see my screen over here. You are using the app, so down the side you have like activity, chat, teams, all that kind of stuff. Yes. No one's saying no, so I'm assuming so. So if you click on Teams, you should have your Desmos PL using Desmos activities team in there. And then when you're in there, there are these 3 groups. So whichever group you're in, so if you're in group 1, I would click group 1 and I'm going to join that meeting. If you're in group 2, click on group 2, hit join, same for group 3, click there and join. So I'm assuming everyone's back, so you can lower your hands. All right, so now let's go ahead and get started with some Desmos stuff. Give me 1 second so I can pull my screen up to share it with you. And some of you are already in here from what's on the agenda. So if you have the agenda, the link to this activity is there.
I just dropped it in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Javier.
No problem.
And if you do not have the agenda open, I'm going to share my screen so you can get going on that.
And then I missed it, so I apologize if I'm repeating you, Katie, but we have a paste for those first 2 slides. So if y'all can just work through those first 2 slides once you join that activity, and then Katie will give us some directions on how the rest of the class will go. Comment in the chat, you can't get past slide 2, that's purposeful. And that's something that we'll talk about today, how we can use pacing to restrict where students can and can't go in an activity.
All right, now your time is up for that. So what we're actually going to do now is we're going to do a number sense routine. All right, so you should be paused right now, so you can't do anything on Desmos. And now I am, give me 1 second. All right. Now you are restricted to 1 screen. So right now, the only screen that you should see is this one. So you're going to take 1 minute. I'm going to say 1.5 minutes. So I'm going to give you until 1:25. So until 1:25, I want you to think to yourself, which one of these 4 does not belong? Make sure that you can come up with a reason as to why you think that one doesn't belong. And also, if you come up with 1 solution, see if you can come up for a reason for every single one of those. So again, I'm going to give you until 1:25 to think to yourself, which one does not belong. Now what you are going to do is you are going to go back into your same group that you were in before, And Jacqueline, I believe you were in group 3. I went ahead and put the link to group 3 in the chat. So if you go into the chat, you should be able to access that. And we'll see how that goes. What you're going to do is you're going to go to your group and you guys are going to take a few minutes and you're just going to share with each other some of the solutions that you came up with. If you could be back in this general meeting at 1:28. So right now it is 1:25. You're going to talk with your group members about what you came up with and you're going to come back at 1:28. Before you do that, I want to make sure I share one thing with you so that you don't have to like worry about split screening or anything. When you go into your group, so if you're in group 1, when you get there, up at the top, there are these different things going on in there. If you click files, I put a picture of this number sense routine. So if you click on which one doesn't belong, this picture is going to pop up so that you can not have to worry about going back and forth between Desmos. It's already there in your Microsoft Teams. All right, so again, if you could go with your groups and come back at 1:28. All right, so what I want for you to do now is if you could go back to the Desmos activity, and I'm going to give you until 1:32. If you could fill out the slide where you are going to put in some responses for what you thought didn't belong. All right, now it could be something that was your original idea, or it could have been an idea that you heard someone else say. Just anything that you want to share, if you could on the Desmos activity share your idea, and it is unpaused for you. I like to see that some of you are coming up with reasons for more than just one, which is great. All right, now I'm sorry, but hey, you should be paused. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're going to share out. So until 1:36, we're going to share responses. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to share my screen. And you're going to tell me some of the things that either you came up with or maybe it was just, again, an idea that you liked. So right now you should be able to see what I've got here. All right, and so this is kind of going to be a free-for-all. So try to be respectful of if someone is starting to talk, stop talking and just kind of like with each other figure out who's going to say what. But go ahead and start giving me reasons for why some of these don't belong. And go. Don't be bashful.
B doesn't have a variable.
Okay, so you said that B does not have a variable. So can someone tell me what that person meant by the fact that it doesn't have a variable?
It's the only one without an X in it.
Okay, so you said it's the only one that without an X. Okay, thank you. All right, can someone else give me a reason why one of these doesn't belong?
A is the only positive coefficient.
So only positive coefficient. All right, thank you. And what did they mean by it's the only positive coefficient? What's coefficient mean?
The constant in front of the variable is a positive number.
So the constant in front of the variable is a positive number. So do you guys agree that the constant here is a positive number?
I agree, yes.
Great, thank you. All right, any other reasons why some of these don't belong?
C is the only one with an exponent that's there.
Okay, so only one with an exponent that is there. Okay, so exponent, how did he know that there was an exponent there?
Because there was a 2 appended to the variable x,
So
after the variable x.
this 2 right here after the x is the exponent?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. He also said that it's the only one with an exponent that is there. Can anyone explain what he means by the fact that it was the only one that's, quote, there?
The A and D have an implied 1, and if there was an x next to B, it would have an implied 0.
So you're saying that the exponent with A is 1, the exponent with x is 1, and what did you say about B?
If there was an x there, it would be implied that the exponent is 0.
So you're saying that I could write it like this?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Does anyone else have a reason why one of these does not belong?
In D, it's the only one without a 3 in some form in the answer.
Okay, so this is the only one that does not have a 3.
Can't wait for the next question.
What does he mean by the fact that there's not one without a 3? There's not one with a 3. I'm sorry. Okay. I'll take one more. Does anyone else have a reason, or did you see a reason from somebody else that you liked about maybe why one of these doesn't belong?
Come on, Sarah. Yours was good.
Oh, thanks. I said B doesn't belong because its function graph doesn't intersect the origin.
Okay, so
That's totally cool.
Yes.
not intersect the.
That's why I wanted to give her credit.
Yes, thank you for sharing. Those are all great ideas. All right, so that is the end of our number sensor team. Thank you all for participating in that. And thank you for encouraging each other to speak up. That was great, especially when everyone in this PD right now, we do not all know each other. So the same experience is going to happen in the beginning with our students that they're not really going to know each other. So thank you for participating. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. All right, so now let's really get to the meat of this, of doing some fun Desmos stuff. All right, so give me 1 second so that I can get you set on the screens that I would like for you to do first.
While Katie's getting that set, I'm just going to kind of address some of the open comments that y'all gave us on slide 2. There's a range of familiarity. Some of you just want to know, how do you use the dashboard, run on activity? We're definitely going to address that today, as you saw on the agenda. Creating activities or editing activities is something that we won't get into during this time right now, unless you want to hang on afterward, ask some specific questions, or set up a time. We're happy to take that time to meet with you if you have an activity in mind, or just want to play with how do you edit an activity. So that won't be specifically addressed today, but we can arrange a time to meet with you for that.
Yes, Javier, thank you for specifying that. All right, in just a second, you are going to get started on doing some math. We're going to do this in 2 parts. We're going to do some where it's all math related, so you can see how you might use Desmos in different content areas. Then eventually we'll get to a part of you just kind of like playing around with some of the different components that can be used in an activity. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and get you started. And again, you're going to be restricted to slides 5 through 20. All right, you do not have to do all slides 5 through 20. They're covering different content areas, so you can kind of play around and do what you want. The first slide that you're going to see is it's going to tell you what's happening on each slide. So if you're a middle school person and you want to focus on middle school math, it'll tell you where to go. If you teach Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, what have you, there are different places for you to go. So again, I'm going to give you about 10, 15 minutes. We'll say until 1:43, because it's easier to remember a weird number like that. Until 1:43, I'm going to let you guys just kind of go forth and do what you want to do with slides 5 through 20. So you should.
Do you mean 53 or 43?
I meant 53. I meant 53. Thank you.
No worries. So we'll 153.
So until 1:53, go forth and conquer.
And I just want to reiterate, and then I'll go on mute. to not aggravate you while you're doing your math. If you have a question from a student point of view, you can unmute or use the chat to ask that pretty quickly. If you have something about the functionality, let's keep that to chat for now so that we can choose to address that as a whole group at the end of the time.
And if you notice, if you're looking at the screen that I've shared, I've anonymized the name so your name doesn't pop up, but whatever your random name is on this dashboard is also showing up on your screen. So if you want to keep up with if you're getting things right or getting things wrong, you can kind of see if there's checks or X's going on. So just one thing to take a look at. I do want to take a minute, sorry to interrupt, and point out here on slide 8, some of you have X's on there. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong in the end. It just means you're wrong right now because you might not be done. So when you go to the next slide, it could change to a check. So there's a little bit of a lapse in time there. So you should be paused on purpose. Because I wanted to take a minute to take a look at one of the slides. And for the one that I'm going to show, I know that a couple of you aren't here yet, but there's still something that I wanted to point out. All right, so on slide number 13, I want to take a look at this together real quick. So on this one, it is asking you to graph parallel lines. So what it wants you to do is grab point B and drag it so that we create along that a line that is parallel to the given line y equals negative 3x plus 2. So first of all, can someone tell me how I graph parallel lines? You can just unmute yourself and shout it out.
Same slope.
All right, so you have to have the same slope. Thank you. So in this equation, what is the slope of the line?
-3.
Thank you very much. Want to look at that as a fraction though, so I can do rise over run. So if I wanted to say -3, but I wanted to name that as a fraction, how could I do that?
-3/1.
All right, great. And while I'm looking at a lot of your responses, most of you have done the exact same thing. You put your point B on top of A and you said, I'm going to go down 3. So 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to go right 1. All right, but that's not the only direction that you could go. So what else could you do besides going down 3 and right 1?
+3 over -1.
Okay, so when he said +3, -1, where am I going to go?
Rise 3. To the left 1.
Great, thank you. So that was just to show you that even though, again, most of you went down 3, right 1, you could go in the opposite direction and you could go up 3, left 1. All right, go back to where you were. All right, I'm going to pause you again because there is another slide that I want to take a look at together. And it looks like some of you actually were able to fix this on your own based on the fact that the answer was shown on the next slide, but weren't correct the first time. So let's take a look at this one real quick. So this is using equations of circles. So if I want to graph the equation of the circle, can someone tell me how they figured out how to use this to plot the center of the circle?
The opposite values of the constants in the parentheses will give the center of the circle.
Very good. So since it was x minus 2, it would have an x value of +2. And then since it says +1, it would have a y value of -1. So here's my center, which I saw most people do correctly, but it was the next part where some people were incorrect the first time. So some people from here counted 4 out in every direction to do the radius. But how do you actually find the radius?
Square root of that number.
Right, whatever's at the end, we're going to do the square root of that. So instead of counting out 4, I'm going to count out 2. So I would put my points there. So my circle would look something like that. A little bit rough. All right, and then one other one, and I noticed that everyone didn't get to the last slide, and that's totally fine. But one thing that I do want to point out, and this is something that if you do this with students, you might want to point out as well, depending on what type of, whether this is like a text box or a place for them to just type in math. One person said that the range of a function, I know you can't see it, but this is just for an example, said that it was -4 and then wrote out the word infinity. But if you notice, like up here, I was able to do text, but then also math type. So if you want to make that show up as math type, there's a button right here. When you click that, it then takes it, and you could say -4, and then when you spell out infinity, it will show up with the symbol. So if you use this math type button right here, that's when you can actually make math symbols appear. All right. And I know that you might not have gotten through all of those slides, but again, this was just an example of some things that you can play through, and this was all math related. Now I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. So I'm going to give you until 2 o'clock, and I'm going to have you go from slides 21 to 27, where these are not really math things. These are just different, what we call components that you can do in a Desmos activity. So give me 1 second, and I'm going to edit the pacing.
Feel free to get these wrong on purpose if you'd like. Feel free to get them right if you want to. You are very accurate on those math questions in general, but this is just meant to explore. Some of them don't have right and wrong answers, some do, but either way.
Yeah, so go ahead and again, take until 2 o'clock and just explore the rest of these. So I've paused you again because there is one thing that I want to point out. On this screen, slide 23, please make sure you read the directions. Some of you are doing something that's like correct, but for a different direction. So it says, put the days of the week in alphabetical order. Just wanted to point that out. All right, so it is 2 o'clock, but before we move on to the next thing, I just wanted to take a minute because I was looking at y'all's responses for is a hot dog a sandwich? And it was very interesting, some of the responses that I saw. So for example, Andre said, 2 pieces of bread, check. Protein in the middle, check. Eaten with your hands, check. But then down here, someone said, no way. A sandwich requires 2 slices of bread. So I guess the question is, does a bun have 2 slices of bread? And I'll let you ponder that on your own. I just wanted to point out your responses. All right, so that is it for now for actually doing the Desmos activity. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take just a couple of minutes to do this. But what I want for you guys to do is I want you to go back to whatever group you're in. So group 1 is going to go with group 1, group 2 with group 2, and group 3 with group 3. And I want you to take until 2:03. No, I'll say 2:04 because it's 2:01 right now. Until 2:04, I want you to just talk to each other about what it was like completing this activity. So go to your groups and start talking. Comes back. All right, Javier, is everyone back?
I believe we all made it back.
Okay. Do you want to just go ahead and end all those groups? Because we
I left them. So okay. If anybody still had it on hold in the background, we won't be using them again today. So you can click leave on that window. You can also just let it run in the background. Like we're just not going to use it again today. So don't worry about that.
Yep. And one thing that I forgot to do that I should have done is given every group a group leader, so that when I said come back at 2:04, there was actually someone in your group that was required to be like, hey guys, it's 2:04, like, let's go. So my bad on that. Also, Skip had some
so when
information to
we
share.
all jump into the breakout rooms or the different channels, I just gave Javier and Katie some feedback because we're all learning the platform. And the one piece as a teacher is when the students are all working independently, I told them just go ahead and mute your mic as well, because you may have heard some paper shuffling or some static noise in the background or some coughing. So just for you as a teacher, that might be good practices for you to do is when your kids are working, just go ahead and mute yourself until you need to talk. And then I'll mute myself now.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Skip. Real quick, does anyone, let's do this. Does anyone from group 1 want to share anything that they talked about? Go for it. Just unmute yourself and start chatting.
Now, basically, we just talked about we're hoping we're going to get to the little tricks that you're into, pausing and pacing and all that business. We just stated hopefully everybody in the room did well, as you said, did well in the questions. But it's the interruptions and well, not interruptions, intercession that is important. And I guess that's one of the reasons I'm here, the operational as opposed to the basic content.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is exactly what is going to go on next. So great. Group 2, did you have anything that you wanted to share or ask? Or group 3, so I guess anyone else at this point that had anything that they wanted to share or ask. All right, before I turn it over to Javier to go over those things that you were just talking about, David, about the pacing and the pausing and all of the stuff like that, I do want to mention something about using either an activity like this or just Desmos activities in general, using it as an asynchronous lesson or as a synchronous one. And the answer to that really is either one. It's kind of what the intention of the activity is. So for example, in this one, the way we did it, it really worked for a synchronous lesson because of the pausing and because of the pacing. And I could say like, okay, you work on these slides and I could go over things as you're doing it. But there are other Desmos activities, and there were pieces of ones in this one where you got instant feedback, so you knew if you were correct or not, which that could be good in an asynchronous setting also. Granted, if you're doing it asynchronously, there is no pausing, there is no pacing, it's just kind of do all of these as you see fit, but feedback is provided on the slides, so at least you're able to see if you're doing it correct or not. So again, it just kind of depends on what's the purpose of the activity, and one single activity could be used 2 different ways. So again, it's really just up to you. So I guess if there are no other questions or comments, I'm going to turn it over to Javier, and he's going to go all of the little technical Desmos things now. So Javier, go for it.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie. So folks, if you're following on that agenda link, we're going to do the part 2, teacher.desmos.com quick tour. I'm going to share my screen. At the beginning, I'm just going to show you the teacher dashboard only, what Katie had listed for us. I'm going to very quickly walk through creating an account. I think several people have an account, and then I'll show you what made Katie decide when to pause, what were we doing during that lesson, and then some of the features that have been new since pandemic started back in March, April, what Desmos has released, and they're continuing to release new features. They've actually released 2 new features since Friday that I'll touch on but not dive into today. So let me share my screen. Let's see, I will share my desktop. So bear with me. So you can see that I was logged in as one of the students. I happen to be the 2 pieces of bread, check, check, check. I'm a hot dog believer on this. This is one of those silly questions that you might find, but I'm paused just like you all. And if a student tries to interact with a paused screen, they can't, right? I can see the question still, which might be helpful if you're just quick coming on to answer something on a specific slide. Students do have that in front of them while they're there. But let me show you the teacher.desmos.com side. So if I went there and I wanted to sign in or create an account, like I said, today we're just going to pretend that we already have an account. We've made an HCPS Math Coaches account for this demo. I just use a username and a password. If this was your first time creating an account, the very first thing you're going to want to do to access some of these great activity resources is to go to the top right and click on Desmos Labs. You'll want to check all of these boxes. What this enables is the ability to edit activities that have any of these features, marble slides or geometry. It also allows you to give written feedback to students, which I will demonstrate how that might work. We really anticipate that this is good for asynchronous activities. So some of the feedback that you were getting during the session, real time, check my work with that line segment question that Katie had highlighted. In asynchronous, you're not going to be able to have that pause class discussion, but you might be able to write some feedback. The student will see it. They cannot respond to it is one shortcoming, but it at least enables you to be able to follow up with students on their work. So you want to make sure that all of these are checked so that you have the ability to use those resources. The next thing you'd want to do is go to account settings. And if you have a co-teacher, you're going to go manage co-teachers. So if Skip were my co-teacher for one of my sections this year, I type in his email address here, click add, and this now gives me the ability to share dashboards with Skip. So I don't have to share my login, which is a super important safety precaution in case I have other students that he should not have access to be able to see their information. But since we share some rosters, I want him to see that activity on his own time so that he can give feedback, potentially do some grading, whatever it is that you and your co-lab partner work out. In general, in a classroom, now that we're apart from each other, this is a really important feature if you're using some Desmos activities. I'll highlight that you need to add them here, and then to actually share dashboards requires one more email when you do activities, but you want to set them up to be able to access your rosters. The next thing that I want to show you is creating collections. So I heard some groups talking about where do you find some activities, how would you launch it? And so what we recommend is create a collection. So let's pretend that I've gotten my assignment this year and I'm not just teaching AFDA, I'm also going to be teaching geometry. I'm going to click new collection. I'm going to call it geometry, if I can spell geometry, unit 1, and I'm going to create new collection. The reason I'm doing this is so that I can stay organized when I find activities either within the Desmos site itself, which they have some highlighted, or some activities that the math team at Henrico has pulled together for us. So I've created a collection so that when I go through the framework and find some activities that make sense to me in my curriculum, I can just add them directly to that unit to try to mirror what's going on here to keep myself organized. So this is our HCPS math site. I'm new to geometry. I want to get some ideas. I'll go find the geometry pacing guide and description. I want to prepare for week 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. I'm just going to go to unit 1 for the purpose of this demonstration. I'm going to go and look at what do we as a math team have ready for you all as teachers for some resources, some ideas for lessons. Hopefully y'all are familiar with this. Sorry if you're not a geometry teacher, but it's a very similar process for each of the courses. You could see they were a lot on that site there. I'm going to scroll down and just take a look at what's recommended as experiences, learning experience 1 activities. So when I'm in this first learning experience, I can see there are lots of ideas, question cards, symmetry sort on Google Draw. I could see that I could use some of these in a virtual learning environment. Here in particular is a Desmos activity. I want to check it out. I don't know if I want to use it yet. So I just click that link and you'll notice that I'm logged into my account in the top right. And I can see some of what this activity looks like, but it doesn't look quite like a student activity. So what you'll always want to do is preview. Just like anything else we do as teachers, we want to walk through that activity as if we were a student. So here, there's an opening slide with some teacher moves. These are notes that we try to include so that you have some idea for maybe pacing. I'll show some of that in the activity that you all ran through They can be helpful reminders for you as a teacher, but also just some things to look out for. You know, misconceptions that might occur on this slide, something that you might want to have a discussion about. We try to include some of that as helpful information for you when you're planning. So this looks like it starts with a card sort, line symmetry, point symmetry. I would walk through this for the purposes of going through today. I want to kind of just explore it a little bit quickly here and say, okay, I understand what's happening. They have a built-in check, so this might be okay for an asynchronous lesson. Which of the following images has only point symmetry? Okay, cool. Now I'm starting to ask questions. I know that it's this bottom left one, but I have to explain my rationale. So now you can see students will get a check mark when they select this image, but whatever they write here, something like this, I just guessed. Okay, that student needs some more help, right? We all know that you can get a 1 in 4 chance of getting this one right, but the I just guessed, that requires us to give them some feedback. And so the comments really are helpful to know if we're just going through motions or actually understanding what's happening. There are more questions in this activity. They are using the same images to try to sort through point, line, both, neither. And then this one has students that can see the results at the end, so you can see if you got answers correct or not. Again, might be good for asynchronous environment. If I decide that I want to use this activity, I would click Create Class Code, and I would do this for each section that I have so that I can share that appropriately with different students. So let's say I had 3 sections of geometry. These are the 3 I have. I want to save it for later. I would come here to the plus button in the top right. You can see an Add to Collections menu. This was Geometry Unit 1, and I'll save. That will just help me find that activity later if I need to, or I want to come back and visit it within the Desmos platform so that I don't have to remember where within the framework was it, where within Unit 1 was it. If I know that I'm going to be using a Desmos activity, I can now stay a little more organized in this portal. Are there any questions there? Okay. All right. I want to reiterate there, that was pretty quick. If anybody needs help setting that up, please let us know. We're happy to walk through that process with you. You can send us a message at the end of the session or hang on for a minute there. But let's take a look at what dashboards look like. So these dashboards have no students in them. So when you go to launch an activity like Katie did, you might project this on your screen. You could share this link in particular. But a dashboard without students is not very fun to talk about. So I'm going to go and hop into the activity that we were all doing together during this webinar. The way that you find activities that you've already launched is in History. So you click History. And then here you can see these are the sections that I created and haven't yet run. So History, they start showing up once you create that class code. You all participated today in this activity. And so I'm going to go and take a look at what I saw here. This screen will always pop up. You just exit out of it, and now you have access to the summary page. And so the summary page is really good for pacing and really good for just getting a sense of how are we doing as a whole class with these checks and X's and these different symbols. So I'm going to kind of slow down here a little bit and walk through a couple of the button features and then show some examples of what's going on. If you're following on the agenda, I'll try to stick to that same order, but I might bounce around just a little bit here. So the first thing is the pacing that Katie used. I'm going to change it. I'm just going to bring you all back to a slide that I want you to. So let's pretend that I want everybody to go to slide 5. I can click pacing, slide 5, and make everybody go there. You'll see that 5 of y'all just popped back here, and I can see now that I have 5 of my 14 students on this slide. What that means is that the rest of you are probably on the Teams page looking at my screen and not on your Chrome browser or whatever browser you're using. I'm going to ask you all to just click to that other browser wherever you had the Desmos activity pulled up, and we should start to see more students popping back to this screen. Or if people have X'd out of it, which is fine. But I should start to see. So now I've got 6 here. And I can see who's not here, right? Again, it's anonymized, so I actually can't call out exactly who's not here, but I could scroll through. I know that we got to slide 27, so some students are still waiting up on slide 27. I'm going to go back. Pacing is just helpful for those all-class moments, and if you are doing this synchronously, you can see which student is maybe not on the proper browser page. So it's just helpful to kind of bring everybody together. Pacing really is something for a synchronous session. For asynchronous sessions, that's where we want to get into feedback and how to utilize that. I'll show that in a little bit. But in either session, you're probably going to want to anonymize this list. So Katie talked briefly about this earlier. It by default is not anonymous. So when students log in, it will be their actual name. So here you all are as participants, students in my class. I'm at the top. If you anonymize, it will assign a famous mathematician to any student, so some mathematician throughout time. You'll notice that if you focus on the top name, it's Andre all the time. It's also me. It assigns the same name for that activity to that student. It does not mean that that student will always be Andre for the rest of the school year. It's just for this activity. But if you switch modes, the names are consistent. Another thing that we can do is sort this list. I'm going to allude to that asynchronous time here. It defaults by time entered. And in the spring, when teachers were maybe doing some grading of asynchronous activities, if you use the 3 dots, you can always hide a student. It drops them to the bottom of the list. So these 2 students are hidden. That might be because I've already looked at their work. I've given feedback and they haven't. I want to make sure that the next time I log in, I'm giving the next student who joins their feedback. So it's just kind of a workflow process that you might be able to do. But there are 2 other choices, sorting by name or shuffling. It will sort by whatever the name is that the student joined with. So it is not very easy to take attendance this way because it does not default by last name. It goes by first letter of whatever name has been joined. And then shuffle is to provide random order. Recommend using shuffle if you're going to be highlighting student work so that you're not always going to whoever was at the top of the list. So that's just something to be aware of. I'm going to unhide so that I am at the top because I want to use me as examples for a little bit. So those are kind of your 3 main buttons over here on the left. I'm going to leave things anonymized. I'm going to leave things paused, and I'm going to paste you all on screen 5 for right now so that you can see something about feedback. So that was a feature that we had activated in the labs. And right here you can see a bunch of symbols on the dashboard: dots, dashes, X's, checks. And here I've given some feedback. This little triangle on the top right of any one of these boxes is feedback that I've given. So I'm going to click into that box so you can see how to give feedback. The first thing to do is when you go to that screen, any screen that you can look at student work on, at the top, there's the ability to give feedback. You just click that button. It pulls up this dialog window, and then you can just type a message. Here is feedback. The student will know what screen it's on and when you gave it relative to the moment they're reading it. You can see that all 3 of these messages have been unread by a student. So let's get some feedback that you can see is read by a student, which I'll do here. I'm going to give feedback on this slide. Choose any topic to read. This wouldn't make sense for an actual student, but I'm now going to split screen so that you can see what I would see on the student side. I'm going to unpause. Sorry. So here I am logged in, and I can see my teacher has left me lots of feedback at the top of a student screen, no matter what slide they are on. So let me make it 2 slides that I can navigate between. It says that I have feedback. You'll notice it's gray here, but green here, because I'm actually on the slide that I'm supposed to be reading this feedback from. When a student clicks, they can see all of the feedback their teacher has provided, and they can navigate between these screens if the pacing enables them to go back and forth to those screens. So choose any topic to read was on screen 5. I can't go to screen 10 right now because of the pacing. So this is again for asynchronous mode. Pacing affects feedback. So I'm going to eliminate pacing for right now, just to show you that. The student can now jump to slide 10 to see what the feedback was. Okay, or as Katie had shown, read the directions, right? I went in and purposely went Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's the normal order we put days, but this was highlighting alphabetical order. What did I do on screen 11? Oh, I gave an accurate answer, but I circled the wrong dot. Not really sure why. I just chose to do something to give feedback about. Questions on that item? Okay. You'll notice that when I'm back on the dashboard, the triangle has turned from green to gray. That at least lets you know that the student has seen your feedback. And again, if I click in to that feedback feature, there is none unread. It's all been read. So all good from my point of view as a teacher. Okay. I want to get into what these dots mean, or these symbols mean, dots, dashes, X's, and checks. I think it's relatively self-explanatory that check means that something is right and X means something's wrong. But it's a little bit more than that. It's when the computer can check everything on a screen. It provides a check or an X, or if there's something a computer can do to mark as right or wrong, it will produce a check or an X. So I'm going to show this question right here. Whoops. I'll click into Andre. So why did I get this wrong? Get rid of feedback. So I put this at the eye distance of 9 instead of up at 5, like it was supposed to be. So that's why I have it wrong. So a computer can obviously provide that feedback for us. Looks like I had a couple other classmates. What's interesting is these two classmates plotted them differently, but they'll both be marked correct. So when I look through this slide as a teacher, I can see that I had several people getting this right. And if I want to highlight that fact to the class that there's not one right answer, there are several right answers, excuse me, on this screen, I can just overlay all the student responses or pull them up one at a time. So we had lots of students getting these right in relatively the same area because that was required, but there wasn't just one right answer. There are multiple right answers on this question. The computer is still able to verify that for us. So as a teacher, I can look, most of my class is doing great. I might want to give some feedback over here to Andre so that he can get back on the right track. Oh, the anonymous feature won't let you know if it's a male or female student. So that actually, I just happen to know that I was the student there, but you won't know who you're giving it to. The dots mean that there is something that a human needs to verify. So let's take a look at a question that had some dots on it. Dragging point B, that would be something that I would need to look at as a teacher for what happened on that screen. So let me just go to another student. Actually can't. So here, nothing, the computer isn't grading that. It's a little more of a sophisticated question. There is a way to mark it correct, which students got their feedback on when we said show the line. So that was something that Katie had written. So is that clear on what's happening with the symbols there? Dots mean that you need to put your eyes on something because we asked the student to start explaining their answer, and this was an opinion. Students, we gave them the ability to see the original line and check the line. We doing okay there? The last symbol, a dash, there's nothing for a student to do there. So like on this screen, if y'all had seen it, this is just information for a student. It's purely directions. They can't put in an input. So I'm not going to spend my time as a teacher checking out that column. Dashes let me know that I have something else worth my time. Any questions there? Very rarely there's a warning sign. I think I changed the agenda. There is a fifth symbol. It's a triangle warning sign. It's very rare, but if there is an input, it's usually on a Desmos created activity that requires an equation and students did not submit an equation but submitted an expression, there'll be a warning sign because we want to intervene with that student, make sure that they understand the prompt so that they're giving us a response that would make sense. Okay, I showed you about sorting. You'll notice some of these slides have light bulbs, some don't. So these are more of those teacher tips. So if I go to this screen, sample responses, that's one of those items where we might try to drop you a note, or for Desmos created activities, the Desmos headquarters employees have dropped a note just reminding what to look out for what students might write. There could be some pacing reminders. Use pacing to restrict students to the screen. This would be a great spot to give everybody a minute, have their response, and then talk about what they noticed, where they put their points, and how there were multiple correct answers. Doing okay there? Not every slide will have a teacher move, but we try to get that as helpful tips for everybody. This button right here, plus person, share with a co-teacher. So this is why it was important to load up your co-teachers. Once their emails are here, it says your co-teachers can view any dashboard you send them. So I would need to copy this link and then send Skip and Katie an email, but then they would be able to pull up the dashboard. They can do it at the same time I do or at a different time on their own to be able to give some of that feedback, to look through what our students are understanding or not understanding, and be able to help out from wherever they are without sharing a login. So you copy the link, you send it. You would need to do it for each individual activity, even for each section. That is a new feature that's still being developed. So that might change, that you can share it once. But for now, the protocol is every activity and every class code that you create, you would need to send that link to your collaborative partner.
Javier, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's great about that collaborative feature as well is, so for example, like for this session, Javier and I are both kind of the teachers of it. And so with that link, if we had done the providing written feedback, we could both provide feedback to students, and students won't know which one of us gave that feedback. So it kind of levels the playing field for the general education teacher and the exceptional education teacher, that they're both really seen really as equals in this situation, because kids don't know who that feedback is coming from. It could be from either teacher. So it really does a good job of just making both teachers really being like the head teachers of the classroom, which is a great thing.
Yeah, thanks for that input. As Katie said, it's not going to assign a name, so they don't know which teacher it's from. There's no anonymized feature for that. That's always true. Whoever's giving the feedback, it's anonymous. I'm going to paste everything back to 21 through 27. So again, people are popping over here. I'm going to show you the student view. Just as I want to be able to, I think I can do both at the same time. Let's see. So on slide 21, this is what Katie was doing during that lesson. She was seeing you all were moving around. She had her dashboard up for you as a class. I'm Andre. You can see that the student knows their anonymous name in the top left. Hopefully you all had seen that. And it's relatively real time in terms of the movement as I go through. I had that one wrong. I could go change things around. I could get it right. The computer's grading it here. Draw a favorite shape. So this is cool. I decided to do this. Looks like lots of us did this. So I want to know what these other tabs do, because the summary tells me to put eyes on it. Instead of going through one student at a time, which I could do here, it would take a while. So I could go one at a time. This is nice. This is where you'll want to use the teacher tab. So the teacher tab lets you, it's more helpful for looking at your whole class. So think of the summary as, where are people? Are we all generally together? Is one student working way ahead? Like in this moment, the snapshot looks like I've got two students who are generally a bit farther along than everybody else, and then most of us are here. But then if I want to highlight or see specific student answers, this teacher view kind of gives me a sense of who's on the right path, who do I need to intervene with. We got some cool pictures going on here. And if I wanted, if it were a drawing where they all should be the same, I could overlay them, and hopefully I'd see, and this might be like if you're trying to hit a specific point or the circle sketch. So I'm going to go back to, how did our circles do? I don't remember which slide our circles are. Here we go. I could overlay and see that we have a lot of people who are generally in the right realm, some that aren't, and this might help me to see who's not doing so well. Again, y'all are very accurate, so I had to go and make some student errors to be able to share and to highlight. What's cool as a teacher is if you were to go one-on-one with a student, anything that I draw here, it doesn't actually show up on their screen. So I can edit their sketch. So if I want to bring them over and start from scratch, it's not going to affect their work at their computer. It's just our ability to see it together. This would obviously be very helpful within an actual physical classroom environment. The last thing is, how did Katie show the questions? Maybe she wanted to have a whole class discussion, and I do want to spend a moment on card sorts here with this. So again, students are doing a card sort. I can see how each student is doing in general, and I see we've got some errors here. So I'm going to go and take a look at this one. And let's say I made this card sorter. It's too much going on. I don't want to check. This one only has 3 that are matched. I can show my answer key, and I can see that they've got these 2 correct, and these 2 are not grouped correctly. But the answer is that it's that's absolutely right. No, it's not. Let's see. This is the right-hand turn. The other one, so left-hand turn off to the side. The 2 unmarked cards I can see down here. So I should have 3 groups of 2 and 2 that are ungrouped. And then I can see which ones students have grouped correctly. It doesn't change anything on their screen again, but it helps me to know some helpful advice that I might be able to give to students. Right here, you'll notice that these cards aren't grouped at all. There are still 2 correct. That's because there are no cards grouped. And since there are supposed to be 2 cards left off to the side, those are marked correct by default. Questions there? If I wanted to show that to the class to get them started, I could hit that student tab in the top right, and then I could maybe suggest to my class, hey, there's a lot going on in this card sort. Consider getting yourself organized. Put the images on the right, put the words on the left. I might choose to model this with a shared screen and say, now you have more room to work. The first time you do a digital card sort, we did give you all directions here for grouping them. It seemed like everybody did okay, but if students need help, you can show them. This does not mean they're grouped. You will see them grouped together. If you want to hide them, you can hide them with an arrow to make more space for you. If you want to unclick them, unclick them. And it doesn't matter if you have words on top or on bottom, the group is being looked at when the computer is grading correctness. So card sorts are a pretty powerful feature that we can utilize, and the dashboard really helps us to see big picture. Are we doing okay? Yeah, we did pretty well as a group. Which students do I maybe want to go and intervene? Check on real quick. Okay, we got some things going on here. And then that whole class view using that teacher tab. Any questions on any of that? I know it was a pretty quick crash course there. None. Okay. I'm going to come back to this session here. I'm going to hand it back to Katie for a little bit of wrap up.
All right, yes, so that was the bulk of everything. So again, you started by doing the Desmos activity as a student. Then we, and by we, I mean Javier, went through how to create those collections and create class codes to actually get activity started. And then he went through the dashboard to kind of show all the different pacing moves and the pausing moves if you were doing this in a synchronous lesson. So what I'm going to do now is just to kind of end this session is if you go back to the Desmos activity, I'm going to paste it to the very end just for a few reflection questions. And really at this point, if you just want to finish up these slides and then that's it and you leave, that's totally fine. If you have any follow-up questions while you're working on the reflection, I think we can stick around probably until like 2:50 to answer any questions. But after that, if there's something that you want more information about or still need a little bit of one-on-one help, our emails are on that agenda and you can reach out to us and we can help you one-on-one if there's anything further that you need. So again, that being said, give me a second and I'm going to paste the activity so you can do the reflection. All right, so the activity is unpaused. There are 4 reflection slides. If you could complete those before you leave. If you have any questions, we'll be here for about 10 more minutes for you to ask questions.